Welcome to an Alt Shift X live stream where we're going to be speaking about the final season of Game of Thrones. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear what you want to talk about. But until then, we're just going to talk about this most recent trailer. We're going to talk about some general sort of predictions for the final season. And we're otherwise going to figure out what's what with this throne. A lot of people are shouting late in the chat. My goodness, I'm like a second late. A wizard is never late, all right? We're exactly on time. So this latest trailer is called Aftermath, and it is like the Crypts trailer that they put out. I think it's not an actual collection of scenes that we're going to see in the show. It's just a piece that's meant to evoke a certain theme or a certain idea about what's coming. So we're seeing all these objects that are associated with all the major players scattered around Winterfell, and you get the very strong sense that something bloody awful has happened, and all of our favorite characters are now frostier, less friendly versions of themselves. That's the idea, and a lot of the major characters are represented here, with some notable exceptions, which I find interesting. So we've got the Stark flag, obviously looking tattered. That shot looks very similar, actually, to Season 3, Episode 9, when we see the burning... Oh, Season 3, Episode 10, when we see the burning Stark banner. I can pull that up. This shot here. Don't they look similar? This is the burning Stark banner at the start of the Red Wedding. And that was a moment of saying that, whoa, things have gone badly for the Starks. They've just been stabbed up by Roose Bolton and the Freys. So that's a Stark banner engulfed by flames. And here's a Stark banner that seems to be damaged by ice, right? So we got two different flavors, ice and fire, destroying House Stark. Y'all can hear me, right? The chat is so misleading. Like, you can... This is all good, right? The connection's good? All right, cool. So yeah, we got the Stark banner that's looking unwell, and then we got this pan-out view of Winterfell. There's obviously been some kind of battle here. There's the broken tower where Bran fell and broke his back. There's the Heart Tree and the God's Wood. Here's this main courtyard. Apparently they built like this giant Winterfell set for the... You can't hear me? What do you mean you can't hear me? Can you hear me or not? You can hear me. Alright, someone's... Oh my god, someone's like ultra gaslighting me in the chat. Okay, good. Alright, we good. Alright, this looks to be a arrow with a dragonglass tip on it. So they're going to be using dragonglass weapons to kill all these White Walkery fellas. Thanks very much for the super chat, Noah Long. Yeah, we are very close to 1 million subscribers, so if you'll want to, smash that like button, that subscribe button, that would also be great. Thanks for the chat, Steven and KW, cheers. And so we got the wolf outside the Winterfell crypts, and the Winterfell crypts could turn out to be really important this season. Not least because they have a whole bunch of dead people in them. That's the thing about crypts. They got dead people in them, and White Walkers can raise them as zombies, potentially. And there's a heap of stuff in the books about the people in the crypts being... rising from the dead. There's lots of little hints and suggestions. Every time someone goes down to the crypts, they describe how the flickering fires in front of these statues of the dead people look like they're about to rise. So maybe something along those lines will happen. Although I think that probably won't happen in the show, just because it would feel a bit out of the blue and weird, at least if they have like the really ancient Stark Kings rising up as some kind of White Walkery spirits, as seems to maybe be happening in the books. But the show, yeah, like maybe we'll have some Stark family members coming back. Like we could certainly have some like a White Hodor and like a White Rickon and like other Stark characters who have recently died. We could maybe see at this battle, which would really be horrifying. It would be like when remember in Hardhome when those child whites attacked the wildling chick. That was deeply upsetting. And we could see something similar. Yeah, remember this scene here? where these whites who were like children attacked this woman. What was her name again? I forget the wildling woman's name. But these wildling kids like attacked her, and she just couldn't fight back because they were kids she knew. And she couldn't fight those who she loved, and maybe something similar will happen at Winterfell, and maybe that's why Arya is so freaked out in these trailers. So we've seen Arya running away and terrified. Yeah, Carsey, that's right. Thanks, chat. We've seen Arya terrified and running away in this trailer, and maybe the reason for that is that she's running away from dead people who she knows. Thanks very much for the super chats. Rich, Banana Face, Purple, Martin, Caligula. Banana Face asks, "Do you think Littlefinger is still alive?" Yeah, I think Littlefinger I think Littlefinger's dead for sure. Like there are some theories that like, oh, maybe Littlefinger actually did some deal with the Faceless Men and he's secretly still alive. Because we do know that Littlefinger talked to the Faceless Men, or we know that Littlefinger knows about the Faceless Men from like season 1. And when Littlefinger was doing his shenanigans with Sansa and Arya, trying to like divide them, people reckon there might have been something weird going on. And so maybe a faceless man wearing a face of Littlefinger died for Littlefinger, and the real Littlefinger is still out there. That's what a lot of people reckon. I don't think that anything that weird and complex is likely to happen, especially with Littlefinger, because we got such a good end to him in the finale. Like, it was all about bringing justice for the crimes he did against the Starks, and it was all about Sansa and Arya reuniting again to get something done, and all of that is undermined if they bring back Littlefinger, It's a lot of very optimistic standing going on. Like the people who want Stannis to come back. Like there's still a pretty strong contingent of nerds who think that Stannis Baratheon is going to come barging through the gates of Winterfell and kill the Night King. But I think that's optimistic. I think those people will stay dead. Thank you for the donations. Disgruntled, Hassan, Cloud, Duvan. Cloud asks, do you think Quaithe will be addressed this season? So you'll remember Quaithe, don't you? Quaithe was memorable. She was in season 2. She had a good mask, she had a nice dress, and she said some cryptic shit. In the books, she has more of like an ongoing role where she like appears to Daenerys in dreams. And she says this thing, to go forwards, you must go back. To go west, you must go east. To reach the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Which is just a wonderfully vague prophecy. And what that seems to mean is it refers to how Daenerys, like in season 6, Daenerys goes back to the Dothraki before she goes to Westeros. It's about Daenerys like sort of reconnecting with her roots. Daenerys in the books is full of like all sorts of like prophecy and like magical foreshadowing and stuff going on, which isn't really as present in the show. And no, I don't think we'll see Quaithe again. Because all she really did in the show was that she warned that, like, dragons are fire made flesh, and fire is power, and when they see them, they will hunger. So Quaithe was, like, warning Daenerys that the warlocks of Qarth will want to steal her dragons. And then in the later episode, Quaithe was telling Jorah, hey, I know that you love Daenerys, and I also know that you betrayed Daenerys. Are you going to betray her again? So really the only purpose of that was just to, like, get us thinking about Jorah's, conflicts and stuff. So I think it's really unlikely that we'll see Quaithe return. In the books, however, there are some interesting theories about maybe Quaithe is Shiera Seastar, who's this old Targaryen chick, and there's all sorts of stuff going on in the books. Someone asks, do you think Dario and Meereen will return? Yeah, well, there's a whole rant there that I could go off on. But basically, no. I don't think we'll see Dario again. But I do, like, I want to run a little, like, segment here that I call Dario questions. Because let's remember a few important facts about Dario, right? Let me just pull up my Dario notes. Because Dario gets left in charge of Meereen. Daenerys spends, like, all of Season 5 and all of Season 6 trying to bring peace to a deeply divided marine, where the slaves are really happy that they're not slaves anymore, but the slave masters are less happy, and there's all these social problems, and there's the Sons of the Harpy stabbing people up, and Daenerys' solution to this really complex political situation ultimately was to burn the slavers' fleet that attacked them in the end of season 6, and then to warn the surviving slavers not to attack again. She gave a very stern warning: don't you do another war while I'm gone. And then she left Slaver's Bay, or aka the Bay of Dragons, in the hands of this fella, Dario. Dario, who explicitly doesn't care about Marine or its people. Like he literally says in the episode when she leaves him in charge of Marine security, he says, "Fuck Marine, fuck the people," as though he was the Hound. Is that gonna work? And like the entire like political thing of when Daenerys leaves Marine, she's saying like, oh, you know, I have these dragons, so if you try and enslave people again, I'm gonna burn you with my dragons. And that's like the deterrent that's preventing the slavers from taking back over Marine. But as soon as Daenerys drops that deterrent, she takes the dragons away. She leaves with the dragons that are the one thing that's creating peace. This is the moment here in season 6 episode 10 when Tyrion's like, hey, these dragons are the reason you should never attack Marine again, but then they take the dragons away and leave it with Dario. So look, I would love it if in season 8 they had a moment where Daenerys gets a letter from across the Narrow Sea from Dario, and Dario's saying, Dany, you know the whole like bringing peace to the Bay of Dragons thing? It didn't work. Didn't turn out. Turns out that those slave masters really wanted their slaves back, and they've reinstituted the whole system. And then Dany would have to like, you know, question and go through like a lot of reevaluation of herself as like a leader and like what her approach should be in Westeros. Because Daenerys' whole arc is all about, should I be brutal and should I kill people, or should I be peaceful and make compromises? What's the best way to rule? That's what Daenerys is all about. And I really just don't think the Marine arc in season 5 and 6 had like an adequate conclusion to that, when it just ended with, oh well, I'll kill people and leave. Like, really? Thank you, Aaron Skis, who asks, who was your vote for Dragon Rider, Jon or Tyrion? I think Jon absolutely will ride a dragon. I think he'll ride Rhaegal, who is the green dragon, who is named after his father Rhaegar. I think that this could well be like the scene where Daenerys teaches Jon to ride. And I think that's a near certainty. Tyrion riding a dragon is less certain. I mean, there have been like a bunch of like conspicuous scenes where Tyrion hangs out with the dragons, like this stuff. And some people want to believe that shows that Tyrion is a Targaryen. Which is sort of a theory in the books, that Tyrion might actually secretly be a son of the Mad King. It's a whole thing. In the show, I don't think they're going to reveal Tyrion as a Targaryen, just because like we've already got a secret Targaryen, and the show is not going to want to do 2 in one season, I don't think. But maybe Tyrion could ride a dragon. Because, like, importantly, Tyrion does have experience in the design of special saddles. Back in season 1, episode 4, Tyrion gifted Bran with this special saddle design that allows Bran, while crippled, to ride. And Tyrion uses special saddles because he's a dwarf. So you could imagine Tyrion designing a cool dragon saddle for him to ride. I mean, they kind of needed that. Like, didn't Jorah almost fall off Drogon in season 7, episode 6? So maybe we'll see that come into play, and maybe Tyrion will finally ride a dragon, which would be like a wonderful moment of Tyrion embracing like hope and wonderment and adventure again. Because like Tyrion's whole deal is that he was like super depressed in season 5 after he murdered his own father and lover, as you do. So the dragon that he saw in season 5 in Valyria when Drogon flew above him, like that was really the beginning of Tyrion returning to a bit of, you know, optimism and hope back in his life. And then at the end of season 5, when he sees Daenerys fly off on Drogon, like those are moments where those are turning points in Tyrion's arc, where he really starts believing in things again. And Tyrion riding a dragon, I think, would be like the ultimate realization of that. Thank you all for the donations. Neil, Krazy, Ash, Blitzkrieg. Oh my. Jordan S says, "Is it possible that Jon has to kill Dany to fulfill the prophecy?" Yeah, I think that's quite likely. So for those who don't know, there's this prophecy called Azor Ahai. They call it Azor Ahai in the books. In the show, they just say the prince that was promised or the one who was promised. The show seems really reluctant to say Azor Ahai for some reason. But one of the stories about Azor Ahai is that Azor Ahai was in love with a woman named Nissa, and Azor Ahai needed to save the world, and he needed a dope-ass sword to do it. So he tried to forge a sword by he forged a sword, and then he like put it out in water, and then the sword broke. And then he forged a sword and he plunged it into a lion, and the sword broke. And then he made a super duper third times the lucky charm mega magic sword, and then he plunged it into the breast of his loving wife Nissa, and she let out a scream that put a crack in the moon, which is sort of a whole other thing. But the point is that there is like legend and myth to support the idea that the hero Azor Ahai has to kill the person he loves to save the world. So therefore maybe Jon will kill Daenerys in order to, like, you know, make his sword on fire or some shit. But some kind of sacrifice being necessary would make a lot of sense. Sacrifice, and only death can pay for life is one of the, like, deep running themes of, like, magic in both the books and the show. And something along these lines could absolutely happen in the finale of the show. And one of the things that I think supports this is that we've got a bunch of interviews and stuff where Daenerys in particular, Emilia Clarke, the actress, has said that I think this ending will be divisive. And yeah, Emilia Clarke in particular, she said something along the lines of like, oh, you know, it really leaves like a weird taste in your mouth about who Daenerys is. Is this really the impression that she leaves? Yeah, alright, quote. So Emilia Clarke said, "It fucked me up, knowing that this is going to be a lasting flavor in someone's mouth of what Daenerys is." Phrasing, Amelia. But the point is that Amelia's obviously a bit conflicted about this ending, and I could totally understand that feeling if Amelia ends up, you know, sacrificed and dead so that a man can go and save the world. I think that if they do have Jon killing Daenerys, it would be an enormously controversial ending in a lot of circles. So maybe that supports the idea that this Azor Ahai thing is happening. But there are alternative interpretations. Like, a lot of these prophecies and things, they don't turn out to be literally true. And as someone just said in the super chat, that maybe Jon won't, like, literally stab Daenerys with a sword. Maybe he'll stab her with his ding-a-ling and thereby kill her when she gives birth in childbirth to his child. Let me rephrase. Maybe Jon, in having sex with Daenerys, that will be the fulfillment of the stabbing with the sword thing, symbolically, and maybe that will lead to Daenerys' death by giving birth. That could happen because there is a lot of like coxar swords metaphors throughout Game of Thrones, especially in the books. So it would actually be totally consistent with the symbolism if the magic sword that saves the day turns out to be Jon Snow's wang. Go and talk to my boy Lucifer Means Lightbringer if you want to know more about this sort of arcane symbolism stuff. Because is deep, is big, a lot of wangs. Okay, yeah, sorry if I missed some super chats. We're probably not going to get to every single one of them. Max Munro, thanks for the super chat, says, "What are the chances that they'll follow through with the idea that breaking the wheel and instilling the idea of democracy or some sort of government system?" Yeah, so likely, I think, because there's a lot of foreshadowing that the Iron Throne, as an institution, will end. All the history is full of. Oh, well, that's not That's not the Iron Throne. But all of history of Game of Thrones is full of, like, it's a history of rulers, most of which sucked, or most of which had at least deep problems with it. And kind of the point of Game of Thrones is to examine the problems with the Iron Throne as an institution. It's saying that, hey, if you have this system where the son of the king becomes the king and rules over everyone, you end up with some tyrants in charge. You end up with some Tywin Lannister people who are ruthless and brutal, and those are the sorts of people who rise to the top. You end up with Tommen Baratheons who like couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. You got people like Joffrey who are psycho little shit stains. The Iron Throne does not like lend itself to good leadership or governance, as it turns out. And so Tyrion in season 7, episode 6 says, hey, there are alternatives. Like, we don't have to like hand the throne to whichever numbnut comes out of gets born out of someone else. We can set up alternative methods of government. And Tyrion's 2 examples that he suggests are the Night's Watch, their system, and the Ironborn. Now, the Night's Watch happens to use a system of voting. The Night's Watch is unusual in that they choose their leaders democratically. Every Night's Watch brother gets a vote to choose the Lord Commander, and that's how Jon Snow became the Lord Commander. The Ironborn, meanwhile, have their system of Kingsmoot. Here's the Kingsmoot that we saw in Season 6, Episode 5, where the Ironborn choose their leader. It's only like the noble Ironborn who get to like vote, and they don't vote so much as like shout a lot. So, you know, but like we're not using the word democracy exactly. Like, we're not expecting like, you know, ballot boxes in Westeros. But what I'm saying is that like they absolutely are laying the groundwork for some kind of more democratic system. Like, there is also this whole great councils thing that's happened a few times historically in Game of Thrones, where all the lords have gotten together to choose the next king in the event that the current kings are, you know, a bit rubbish. So there absolutely are precedents, is what I'm saying, for some kind of alternative system of government. And given that they mentioned that in Season 7, Episode 6, and given that Daenerys will probably die one way or another, sacrificed or sacrificing herself or whatever to save the world, and given that the Iron Throne we've seen destroyed, in Daenerys' vision in Season 2, we saw the throne room burned off, snowing inside. And, well, yeah, alright, the Iron Throne itself isn't destroyed per se, but there is other imagery in the books that suggests that. So I think that the Iron Throne will be destroyed and some kind of alternative government thing will happen. I think that's the deal. And I think it would be the only satisfying conclusion. Alright. You're seeing Crazy Ex-Girlfriend? Like, block your ears for like a moment if you're concerned about spoilers for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. But for those who aren't caught up, the conclusion to Crazy Ex-Girlfriend was that Rebecca Bunch decided that her endless quest, her deeply conflicted arc to find the man of her dreams who would just solve all of her problems and finally make her happy, she realized that conflict, that endless quest, was in and of itself not the point, and like having the right man would not solve all her problems. So in the finale of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and again, block your ears if you don't want spoilers, in the end, Rebecca rejected the men, and she decided that she's her own person and she doesn't need a guy to solve all her problems, right? And I think the same thing will happen at the end of Game of Thrones, because as it turns out, the entire like conflict and quest and chaos of like trying to get the perfect king and all these kings competing to be on the throne, that is terrible and doesn't work and doesn't make Westeros better, right? So like it's the same. It's the same thing. I think Rebecca Bunch, Westeros, will reject the system of kings entirely. Okay, all right, we're done with Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Thanks for the super chat, Mendel Films. Mendel says that Jaime is Azor Ahai. The signs are there. Thoughts? Well, I'll show you one picture that's interesting. Jurgen Fire. This image is pretty evocative, isn't it? This was one of like the weirder scenes in the show. Season 4, Episode 5, when Jojen Reed and Bran and Marine and Mirren are capped. Mira are captured by the Night's Watch mutineers beyond the wall, and Jojen starts tripping some major balls, and he sees his own hand on fire, and he's very sort of relaxed about it, but it's only on fire in his head. And there's this whole sort of vision about Bran and the three-eyed crow. Jojen was on some extremely dank green dreams. They call them green dreams in the books. Anyway, so Jojen's tripping out, and he's got this fiery hand, which sort of evokes, Jaime with his golden hand, right? And, wielding fire like that is certainly imagery that's associated with Azor Ahai. And Jaime, like, we mentioned that sword forging thing earlier, the whole Azor Ahai creating a sword first in water, then in a lion, then in his beloved wife. Well, Jaime in season 7, he had a pretty pretty damp time of it when he crawled out. Oh no, it's season. Where's that picture? Let me just pull up. Well, yeah, that's good enough. So Jaime fell into a river, avoiding Drogon with Bronn, which symbolically you could see as him being forged in water, because that was a moment that sort of changed him in a way, saying that, oh wow, we really are not going to defeat Daenerys, what with her dragons and everything. So this is Jaime being forged in fire, and then Jaime forging in a lion could obviously be with Cersei. So if Jaime ends up killing Cersei, which like a lot of people see as like almost certain, that could be forging a sword in a lion. And then forging the sword in the woman he loves could mean Brienne. A lot of people ship Jaime and Brienne because they obviously are super important to each other, and Brienne sort of taught Jaime how to be less of a twat, and they clearly love each other in some way. Whether that's platonic or whether that could become romantic is sort of choose your own adventure. But if you do see Brienne as Jaime's love and as his wife in some sense, Jaime killing Brienne after killing Cersei could symbolically fit the story of Azor Ahai forging Lightbringer. And there's also some stuff about like the language of Azor Ahai. There's also some weird dreams in the books. We won't get into it, but like there are some hints that you could interpret as meaning that Jaime could be Azor Ahai. I don't think it's the answer though. Like in the books, the whole Azor Ahai thing is complicated, and one of the like the conditions for Azor Ahai is that Azor Ahai is expected to be the child, or expected to be descended from the Mad King Aerys. So that means that Jon and Daenerys could fit that, but unless Jaime is secretly the Mad King's son, which is a whole other thing, it doesn't seem likely that Jaime's Azor Ahai. So like, yeah, that's not my inclination, but like, I think that there will be multiple people who fit the archetype of Azor Ahai in various ways. Like, there might not be one single Azor Ahai. Yeah, I agree, Crenson in the chat. Yeah, I think there could be multiple people who fit Azor Ahai. So yeah, I mean, Jaime to some extent could be one of those people. Thank you, Matthew Thompson, Poos on Poos, good name. Ours is the Fury asks, how will Viserion die this season? Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? Because really, like, the Army of the Dead is not all that much of a threat when you've got dragons, right? Like, Daenerys surely could cook up a zombie barbecue pretty easily with her 2 dragons. We already saw a bit of that in season 7, episode 6. So I would think that like the real threat is this fella, Viserion. We got a zombie dragon. Well, I mean, there is a bit of controversy over whether this guy is a zombie dragon or more of like a White Walker dragon, because of the way the Night King resurrected him. It's a whole thing. But the point is that, yeah, this fella's the real threat, I would think. So how do you kill him? They could shoot more of those scorpion bolts at him. Like, maybe that would take him down. But we've seen that zombies are more resilient than like normal living people. So maybe they'll survive it. Except the zombie thing changed as well, didn't they? Like, the whole representation of whites in representation of whites. Homonyms are a problem, guys. I mean, like, WIGHTS. The way zombies work in Game of Thrones has changed a lot throughout the series. This was the first white we ever saw. This guy Othor, and he like had a sword put through him and he didn't care. He got stabbed and he didn't care. He got his hand cut off and he kept on going. The only thing that stopped this zombie was being burned. And then fast forward to season 6. These friendly zombinos just get like blown apart with like getting hit with an axe or something, and their whole skeletal body clatters to pieces. These guys, the way the zombies work changes a lot. So for that reason, it's kind of hard to guess how Viserion will go down. Like, will he be more like these strong zombies who are going to be super resilient, or is he just going to fall to pieces? My suggestion is the former. I think he's going to be really tough. And, you know, the obvious way to fight him is with the living dragons, Rhaegal and Drogon. I think we inevitably going to see some super sick CGI dragon fight, which could be cool. And my suspicion is that Bran is going to be involved. Because Bran's got them psychic powers, and there's the whole thing where the three-eyed raven told Bran that you will fly. And Bran's been warging into ravens and stuff, which sort of fulfills the you will fly thing, but surely it would be infinitely cooler if Bran warged into a dragon. And maybe Bran could warg into Viserion to like retake control of Viserion. Some kind of like psychic mind battles between Bran and the Night King seems likely. Because we have seen Bran's visions being invaded by the Night King before. Remember this moment where Bran was having a vision and then the Night King's like, yo, like, I see you. And grabbed him and like made a psychic mark on him. Like, whoa, like there's some whole shit going on here. So maybe that'll continue and there'll be some psychic mind wars, and maybe that will involve like wresting control of Viserion from the Night King. I think that would be dope. Uznek in the chat says, can wargs only warg the living? Yeah, so like we've seen that Bran as a warg, as a skin changer, he can control animals like the direwolves, and he can also control people like Hodor. But would he be able to take over a zombie? I mean, there is a line of thought that the way that the White Walkers control the zombies is by something akin to warging. Like, maybe the way that the Night King controls zombies is by some sort of whole necromantic thing, which is like a whole separate deal to, whole separate thing to warging. But, like, given that the Night King is, like we saw the Night King getting created, right? We saw that this guy is who became the Night King. So it's not as if White Walkers are, like, an entirely, like, different magical species, as we sort of thought they were. Or at least they're not, you know, they come from humans. And since humans, and specifically, like, Northmen and Starks, have the power to warg into people, maybe the Night King was basically just like a warg like Bran, who got turned into a White Walker, and retained his warging powers and was thereby able to raise the dead. Maybe the reason why the White Walkers got out of control of the Children of the Forest was because the Children of the Forest didn't realize that the White Walkers, these weapons that they created, would have the ability to raise weapons of their own. Maybe that's why the White Walkers got out of control. That's why they went all Skynet. Is because when your death monsters start creating their own death monsters, you got a sort of self-replication problem, eh? Positive reinforcement loop. So maybe that's the trouble. Point being, maybe that's how this sort of like connection between Bran and the Night King will play out. They both have like this same form of like psychic power. Maybe we're gonna see some psychic battles, like in that one episode of South Park. I think that's a distinct possibility. Thank you, Neil Cassidy, who says, I like garage doors. Great stance, Neil. I agree. Thank you, Jacopo Della Quercia. Jacopo Della Quercia, for those who don't know, writes some really cool novels, complicated novels that he described them, I think, as like a watch piece, like a timepiece with lots of interconnected cogs and things. Go and check out Jacopo Della Quercia's novel. Dangel Wolf Alpha says, do you think that for Dany to live through season 8, Jon would have to become like Benjen, half White Walker, forced to spend eternity beyond the wall? Yeah, I think that it's near. Well, it's not near certain, but I think it would be really cool if Jon Snow made some big noble sacrifice to save the world, specifically by becoming some kind of a White Walker person. Because in the books, there's this whole thing about the Night's King. Not the Night King, who's the White Walker leader, but the Night's King, who seems to be a different character. The Night's King was someone who like made a deal with the devil, made a Faustian bargain, or maybe he was just thinking with his dick because he fell in love with a White Walker, or maybe with a White. It's a thing. But the Night's King became like this half-human, half-magical agent of darkness who represented like a meeting of like humanity and White Walkers, and he was like this dark figure who like low-key might have actually been the good guy. Just go and watch the Ancient Starks video. We did a whole video on this. But the point is that like there's a lot of like myth and background and history in the books that suggests that maybe some kind of new Night's King might be the solution to this whole war with the White Walkers. And Jon Snow is the guy to do it, right? Like, Jon Snow is endlessly self-sacrificing. He's already a pretty frosty gentleman. He's already died before. He's shown an absolute willingness to sacrifice himself at any moment. He's steeped in, prophecy and is probably Azor Ahai and whatever. And yeah, we've got the precedent of Benjen. So in the books, there's a character called Cold Hands, who is like this good guy zombie, basically. And in the books, Cold Hands is apparently not Benjen, just because like George Martin wrote that by hand in a manuscript that someone found in a library. There's some crazy like literary archaeology that's happened in the book fandom. But look, the point is that Benjen in the show is like he was a Stark, a human who got turned into someone who's like partly White Walker, and the way that they did that was by stabbing Benjen with dragonglass. That's what Benjen says in season 6. He says that I was going to die, and to prevent me from turning into a White Walker, or a White rather, they stabbed me in the heart with dragonglass, and that's why I am what I became now. So yeah, there is a theory that I like a lot, that Jon will become someone like Benjen, someone like a new Night's King, some self-sacrificing thing, and it'll be achieved by stabbing Jon with dragonglass. And the other reason why that's really fucking cool is that could maybe fulfill the whole Azor Ahai Nissa thing. So remember we were talking about how the hero Azor Ahai stabbed his beloved wife with a sword, and that was necessary to save the day. Maybe we'll see a gender reversal of that, and Daenerys will stab Jon with dragonglass, and that'll be the sacrifice. Maybe Dany will kill Jon, not the other way around. And so that would make Daenerys Azor Ahai, which she sort of already is because she's wielding the flaming sword of her dragons and she's, saving the day. She's just as prophetic as Jon is. And Jon would be sacrificed to become the Night's King and end the whole sort of icy part of the bargain. And then everyone could go on their merry way. That would, I think, be a really cool and interesting ending. So that would fulfill Azor Ahai. That would fulfill all sorts of stuff. So I think that would be cool. Who will wield Heartsbane? Says ours is the Fury. We've already seen that Jorah wields Heartsbane in season 8. So Heartsbane, will remember, was the pride of House Tarly. Valyrian steel, of course, being super special because it's stronger and sharper and it can kill White Walkers. And then Sam ran off with the sword, neatly gift wrapped here in sackcloth. And then in the season 8 trailer, we see that Jorah has Heartsbane. That's the Heartsbane hilt there. So we'll see Jorah wield Heartsbane. It makes sense that Sam gave it to Jorah, seeing as Jorah is a slightly of a better warrior than Sam is. And Jorah and Sam made friends when Sam cured Jorah's embarrassing skin condition. So that's nice. No, I just closed that window accidentally. Anyway, Joe Magician's in the chat, is he? Welcome, Joe Magician. We got a super chat from Gold818. I know it's not very medieval, but do you think Westeros could adopt a constitutional republic? Yeah, I think we talked about that before, that I think there absolutely is the foreshadowing and the groundwork for Westeros to get a different system of government, and maybe Tyrion will help Daenerys break the wheel by setting up some kind of something more democratic or yeah, some kind of republic. Thank you, Google Monster. Thank you, Chaitanya. Keep your awesome videos coming. Thanks so much. Deborah, Adam. Adam says, do you think that Jon will keep his lineage secret from Daenerys? I think he might. Well, no, he won't, because Jon, like, Kit Harington has had some interesting interviews recently where he said stuff along the lines of, like, Jon Snow cannot tell a lie. He's done with deceit. And, you know, we saw that in the finale last season when Daenerys was like, hey, Jon, if you just say that you'll not take up arms against me, I'll make peace and everything will be better. If you just tell one little lie, well, everything's going to be a whole lot easier. And Jon refused to tell the lie. Jon said that he's got to be honorable and honest, and therefore he didn't lie. And maybe they will test that, and maybe they will subvert that by Jon going like, ooh, I really don't want to tell my girlfriend that she's my aunt. Maybe, but I think that the truth has to come out, because like from the interviews and from like even like the trailer of like all these shots of Jon and Daenerys looking like real uncomfortable hanging out in the crypts, I think that's an indication that the truth is going to come out, and they're going to have to deal with their relatedness. And that's, you know, it's not only like incest is icky, but it's also the fact that Jon he actually has a better claim on the throne than Daenerys does, because Jon is the son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, whereas Daenerys is just Rhaegar's younger sister, and the way that inheritance works in Game of Thrones means that Jon is the rightful king of Westeros, and that's a pretty big downer for Daenerys, given that her entire story has been about her legitimate claim on the throne. So that's like a whole thing. Thank you, Jade Rabbit, who asks, why don't they just use wildfire? Do you think they will use it? Well, yeah, you'd think that wildfire would be a really good weapon against the zombies, since they are pretty much only weak to fire damage. And wildfire's pretty good at the whole exploding thing. I mean, maybe they'd use it against the zombies, but I think that the role that wildfire will play will be with Daenerys in King's Landing. There's a huge amount of... a lot of people believe that King's Landing will be blown up probably by Cersei, in like a recreation of when the Mad King tried to blow up King's Landing. Because like back in the past, years ago, the Mad King tried to blow up King's Landing, and Jaime killed the king to save the city. And a lot of people think that he will recreate that when Cersei tries to blow up the city, and Jaime will kill his lifelong twincestuous lover. I think that's all but certain in the books. But in the show, well, Cersei has already done like this climactic wildfire explosion in King's Landing. And to me, it would feel like a little bit weird if Cersei did 2 King's Landing explosions. Like, are we really going to use the same climax twice like that? So I don't know, maybe things will go down a little bit differently, but like one way or another, like people think that King's Landing will burn. Like we've seen, because we've seen in season 2 the Iron Throne with the throne room roof burned off and the snow coming down on the throne, this stuff, remember? So like evidently, like we've seen that like King's Landing and the Great Hall will burn. The only question is how. Will it be dragonfire that causes it, with like Daenerys attacking? Will it be wildfire? Will it be like the Night King's dragon? There's a lot of different ways it could happen, but wildfire could certainly be part of it. Thank you, Shannon Thompson, who asks, what are your thoughts on Ashara Dane / Starfall secrets? Yeah, so show watchers won't know this, but there's this family called House Dane. And House Dane are like, well, if you thought that the Targaryens were like arbitrarily like anime super special magical family, the Danes are like even more so. They have been mentioned in some of like the history and lore segments and stuff. But oh, and of course we saw this guy, Arthur Dane. So the fellow who like dual wielded swords and was all super fancy, fighting against Ned Stark. That was Arthur Dane, and he's like renowned as like the greatest fighter ever. But one of the other Dane family members is Arthur's sister Ashara, and she doesn't appear in the show at all. But she was this really beautiful woman. They're all great fighters or beautiful women, aren't they? Ashara Dane was this beautiful woman, the most beautiful in the world, who Ned Stark had a crush on, and Barristan Selmy had a crush on. And word on the street is that either Ned or his brother Brandon hooked up with Ashara at this one house party that got really wild back in the year of the false spring. There was this great tourney at Harrenhal, which was like this big pivotal moment before Robert's rebellion, like 20 years ago or whatever. Yeah, that's Robert. That's Robert there, getting fucking skrunked. And it was basically just a party where everyone was hanging out and like shit went down. And Ashara Dane is sort of at the center of some of those things that happened. And it's also a rumor, no one really knows for sure. But what we do know is that after Ned Stark killed Arthur Dane, he took Arthur's special sword, Dawn, and he took it back to Starfall, the Dane castle, and he brought the sword to Ashara Dane, and then Ashara Dane committed suicide. And there's a lot of questions over, like, why did that happen? What the fuck went down? Some people say that Ashara just committed suicide because she was aggrieved at the death of her brother Arthur, but some people think that maybe Ashara gave birth to a child, like gave birth to Ned's child or to Brandon's child, and then Ned Stark took the child back to Winterfell, and that child is Jon Snow. That's one of the theories, and that's sort of like an outsider theory. That's more of a fringe theory because almost everyone agrees that Jon Snow is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. But like, yeah, there is a whole thing about Ashara Dane who's super mysterious and super interesting. We don't like, she's not really relevant to the show at all, but we'll do like a video about House Dane in the books at some point. So we'll do that. Which, yeah, someone in the chat asked what's Alt Shift X going to do in the future. The basic plan for Alt Shift X after Game of Thrones Season 8 is that we'll do some more, like, Game of Thrones book videos, because there's still, like, a couple of books coming, and there's still a lot of, like, stuff in the books that we haven't talked about yet. So we will do more Game of Thrones book stuff, but I also increasingly want to do some other shows. Like there's a lot of adaptations coming out soon. There are adaptations of Dune and Watchmen and His Dark Materials and The Lord of the Rings, and The Dark Tower is apparently possibly getting a TV show. There are a lot of like fantasy and like sci-fi shows getting adaptations on TV soon, and I'd love to make videos about like all of them. And yeah, there are interesting TV shows like American Gods and the OA. I would love to do the OA, and Dark and Black Mirror and like all of that kind of stuff. Basically any show that is like good and complicated and interesting, we will probably do. We'll try and do videos about. The Wheel of Time is apparently getting a series. So yeah, there's a lot of options, and that's the sort of stuff that we're going to be doing in the future. We might also do some more like educational stuff, because Ultra Tech started out with like real world videos about like science and biology and shit. So maybe we'll do a little bit more of that sort of stuff as well. Yeah, The Witcher as well. Yeah, so we'll be doing stuff other than Game of Thrones, and we'll also do some more Game of Thrones stuff. That's the plan for Alt Shift X. Alright, so that's Ashara Dane and the Danes. Maura Lee, thanks for the super chat, says, do you think Arya was using herself as bait to draw the enemy away in the trailer? That's an interesting idea. I tend to think that Arya's fear in this shot is genuine. It looks like Arya's running for her life, but of course, Arya trained as an actor, or at least as a faceless man. Her whole thing is like taking on identities that aren't hers. So yeah, maybe Arya is pretending to be afraid when she's not really. Although, why would Arya have to look terrified in order to like draw zombies? You know, like why did she like, what kind of acting chops do you have to need to in order to get some zombies to chase you? Probably none, right? So I think that's an interesting theory, but I think it's likely that Arya's fear is genuine. Oh yeah, we got Joe Magician in the chat. So Joe Magician, if you all don't know, does some really cool Game of Thrones book analysis and show analysis. He's got a series called Death of a Ranger, where Joe talks about this fella, Waymar Royce. So Waymar Royce was in the prologue of Game of Thrones, and he gets killed by White Walkers. And there's a whole lot of interesting line of analysis about how maybe the White Walkers were specifically seeking out Waymar Royce because, in the books, Waymar looks a lot like Jon. And the way it works in the books, like in the show, like a White Walker just kills Waymar and then beheads him and then kills Garrett and whatever. But in the he beheads Garrett and he kills Waymar. But in the books, there's this whole thing where like a dozen White Walkers stand in a circle around Waymar and they like sort of fight, and there was like a schoolyard whole brawl that happens. It's great. No, the point is that it's like a duel where like all the White Walkers like watching with great interest to like see how Waymar performs. And when Waymar's sword turns out not to be Valyrian, and when Waymar goes down like a chump, the White Walkers laugh and they're like surprised and interested. But yeah, the point is like there's all this stuff about how the White Walkers might be searching for like a Stark specifically. Go and watch Joe Magician, Death of a Ranger. Really interesting video. Thank you, Sedivran, for the super chat. Do you think the characters going to Winterfell represents each champion of the seven? The father, Jon, the mother is Dany, Maiden is Brienne, Crone is Sansa, Warrior is Jaime, Smith is Gendry, Stranger is Arya. Yeah, so for those who don't know, the Faith of the Seven, which is like the main religion in Westeros, it's like the High Sparrow's religion. It's basically Catholicism. The Faith of the Seven has these 7 aspects of God, and each of them represent a sort of an archetype. Yeah, here they are here. And so like, yeah, you got the warrior, the father, the maiden, the crone, the stranger, all that sort of stuff. And some people have drawn parallels between these aspects of God and the different characters in the show. And yeah, I think you can do that. I don't get the impression that it's necessarily super intentional by the show creators. But you can definitely draw parallels between the characters and the gods. But I mean, you know, you can draw them between anything, right? Like, because they're these sort of archetypical things, like, you know, father figure, mother figure. I reckon you could draw parallels between these gods and basically any set of like 7 characters. But yeah, I think you can think about that. That's cool. Thank you, Christian Cruz. Thank you, Noah Long. Man, the live streaming tool on YouTube is a bit tricky to use. Thank you, Poos on Poos. Oh yeah, so Poos on Poos makes an interesting point that Jon can't become a White Walker because he was raised as a Fire White by R'hllor. Yeah, to be honest, I've still got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about Jon's resurrection. Because in the Game of Thrones books, like, they make a really strong point of, like, resurrections change you. And like, you know, Beric Dondarrion, when he gets resurrected by Thoros of Myr, he comes back sort of less human each time. And they talk about that in the show. They have like this scene where we see Beric's terrible wounds, and he talks about how he can sort of barely remember who he is. I don't remember the exact wording in the show, but the point is that like Beric is really deeply affected by coming back from the dead, because why else would you bring back a character from the dead unless it like changes them profoundly? Whereas Jon, after his death, like, how different has he been? Really? Like he's become like a noble, heroic leader, self-sacrificing warrior. Well, that's what he was before, you know? Jon's whole resurrection in the show is a bit underwhelming. Not to mention the fact that it was literally like a haircut and a sponge bath that did it. Like, that's what Melisandre did to resurrect Jon. Whereas in the books, there are all these theories about like Jon's mind warging into ghost, and then a sacrifice, and then a fire, and then, I mean, it hasn't happened yet, so, you know, just because the show can't compare to your imagination is not fair on the show, I guess. But the point is that that George R. R. Martin once described Beric Dondarrion as a Fire White, which is a really interesting like contrast to the Ice Whites, which is the zombies raised by the White Walkers. So if someone's raised by fire, and if someone is in some sense like magically connected to the Lord of Light, you'd think that he'd be like diametrically opposed to the White Walkers, who are you know, icy death. So yeah, that's a good point, Poos on Poos. Maybe that contrast will be important somehow. Oh, and yeah, by the way, a couple of PSAs. So like, yeah, in case you can't read, we are live streaming every Sunday after Game of Thrones. So for the next 7 weeks, each episode of Game of Thrones is going to come out, and then like immediately after, like 10-20 minutes after the Game of Thrones episode ends, we're going to hold a live stream like this where we're going to talk live about the episode, and that's going to inform the video that we make about the episode. So we will be doing a video, Game of Thrones Season 8 explained video, after each episode. And yeah, we'll be doing these live streams as well. And also, special announcement: we got merch. Let me see if I can pull up. Let me see if I can pull that up. Where's the link? Oh, I should really be a lot more organized for the special announcements. Give me one sec. The special announcement is that we have merchandise. So if you all want to be real fancy fresh, yeah, this winter you can get your genuine, authentic Alt Shift X logo T-shirt. You can get an Alt Shift X logo pin. You can put it on your hat. You can put it on your shirt. You can get two. Put one on your hat and another on your shirt. You could get two T-shirts. You could wear one on the top, one on the bottom. You could do all sorts of stuff. I think you'd look good in it. I think you would look great in an Alt Shift X T-shirt. You should get one. I'd be impressed. So yeah, that's our merch. All right. What are the Dylan can? Oh, the link, by the way, is in the video description. The link. Yeah, merch. Standard.tv/AltShiftX is where you get the merch. Someone says, "Will you ever do a face reveal?" I'm doing a face reveal right now. That's me. You didn't recognize me. That's me. Okay. Dylan Kemp Thorne, thank you for the super chat. Says, "Do you think the Faceless Men will play a role in season 8?" Yeah, we sort of talked about that. I think it's unlikely. Like, the end of the Faceless Men arc was, like, kind of a car crash in Season 6, when, like, Jack and Hagar is like, "You are no one," even though he was, like, being the opposite of no one, because he was, like, approving of Arya killing his student, the Waif, and, like, the Waif was also not no one, and also Jaqen died in Season 5, so, like, why is he still... like the Faceless Men arc, like, they were just really inconsistent about how the Faceless Men work and what they actually want, and I think they're really gonna not bring that up again, to be honest. I think it's a little bit like the Dawn plot, where they just sort of swept Doran and the Sand Snakes under the rug real quick. I don't think we'll see the Faceless Men again, but I think we absolutely will have Arya use faceless disguises again in order to do more assassinations. Oh, damn. You're right, Birdie. We plugged the merch and we lost 100 viewers instantly. You know why? It's because all of those 100 viewers clicked on standard.tv/AltShiftX and they all went and bought Alt Shift X merch. That's why that happened, for sure. So Aaron Skis asks, what do you think becomes of Cersei's baby? I don't think that baby will be born because, let's be honest, is Cersei going to be alive for 9 months and give her enough time to give birth to the child? Like really? Is she going to be around for that long? Like, Cersei, surely to Christ, is going to die. And I don't think season 8 is going to last for 9 months. So for that reason alone, I don't see it happening. James Barclay says, what do you think of the channel The Order of the Green Hand, especially their N+A=J book theory? Would you ever do a collab? So Ned plus Ashara equals John. We talked about that theory before. I think it's not true. I think it's interesting to think about and to talk about. But I think that John is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. I haven't seen much of The Order of the Green Hand, and I don't know. I don't want to gossip about other channels anyway. But yeah, I think it's cool to think about all these alternate different theories. The Butler, thanks for the super chat, says, what do you think causes the damage that was done to the Red Keep that we saw in Dany's vision? Yeah, we chatted a little bit about that. I think that it's fire, and whether it's dragon fire or wildfire or ice dragon fire, we don't know. The shot that we're talking about is this one. What causes this damage? I mean, it is interesting that the keep is burned from the top. Like, it doesn't look like a fire that came from below. Like, this is all untouched. It's the roof that's burned off. So maybe that indicates that it's dragon fire coming from above that burns King's Landing. HK asks the real question. Real talk from HK, who asks, will there be elephants? So the Golden Company is the mercenary army that Cersei has hired to bring over to Westeros to help her take the throne, and we saw them in the Season 8 trailer. These fellas, looking like some elves right out of Lothlorien, they are the Golden Company, led by homeless Harry Strickland himself. And the big selling point of the Golden Company is that they have Oliphaunts. They have war elephants that could probably do some real good stomping on Jon and Daenerys' armies. But I don't see any Oliphaunts here. Do you? Where are the Oliphaunts? How do you even transport elephants with medieval technology across a sea? I guess with great difficulty. But they've mentioned the elephants, so surely we'll get some. And if we do get elephants in Westeros, surely we'll also get zombie White Walker elephants. That would be cool. We might also get like ice spiders, because there's talk in the show about and in the books about like the White Walkers riding ice spiders big as hounds. So that would be cool and terrifying. Nathan Murphy says, how will Sam react to Dany burning his fam? My guess is not well. Next question. Well, no. Yeah, Sam's going to have a lot of feelings about the death of his father Randall and his brother Dickon. Dickon? His father was a cunt, but his brother seemed alright. And I think his feelings about their deaths will reflect that. Thank you, Sarah. Adrian says, do you think Dany has already been betrayed in Season 7, given Tyrion's failure at strategy? Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So we're actually working on a Tyrion recap video at the moment. That's going to come out in like a couple of days, I think. And that's a recap of Tyrion Lannister's entire arc. It's just like the Arya Stark video. And the whole thing with Tyrion in Season 7 is his divided loyalties. Tyrion wants to support Daenerys because he believes that she can make the world a better place. He needs someone to follow, and he likes the approval and the love that he gets from Daenerys. And he wants to help her win, but Tyrion really doesn't want to help Daenerys destroy his family. Tyrion doesn't want Jaime to die. We saw him at the Loot Train battle, like hoping that Jaime won't get murdered in front of him. And also, Tyrion is kind of protective of Cersei, because like he had these war plans where he's like, don't attack King's Landing. You should instead go all the way around Westeros to besiege Casterly Rock, at the same time that you take Casterly Rock with the Martells and the Tyrells, instead of just attacking King's Landing with dragons. And, you know, it just sort of seems like at every turn Tyrion is trying to find reasons to not attack Cersei and Jaime. And so there is, like, in Season 8, it now looks like Jaime is going to go to Winterfell and help Daenerys and Jon fight the dead. In this shot here, Jaime said that I'm going to help you all out. And Jaime knows that Cersei is planning to betray everyone. Because, like, remember in last season, Cersei promised to make peace with Jon and Dany and help them fight the dead. But in actual fact, she's planning to fight them with the Golden Company. Jaime knows that. And so if Jaime is on side at Winterfell, maybe Jaime could tell Tyrion that, hey, Cersei's planning betrayal, and therefore Tyrion will find it easier to fight against Cersei, especially if Jaime is no longer with Cersei, right? So you'd think that the whole Tyrion loyalty thing will get simpler and easier next season, but like something tells me that it won't. Something tells me that this is going to only get more complex, because there are theories about Tyrion making some kind of deal with Cersei, some kind of secret deal. Like specifically, some people think that maybe Tyrion and Cersei agreed that Cersei's unborn child can be the heir to the throne of Westeros after Daenerys, because there has been a lot of talk about about Daenerys' succession. And Daenerys and Cersei and Tyrion's meeting ended with Cersei saying, "Hey, yo, I'm pregnant," and thereby convincing Tyrion to believe that she is legit with the peace deal. It's complicated and ambiguous, and like it's not. Because, like, this scene sort of ends just when it gets interesting, and we don't know if, like, further skullduggery went on or not. My suspicion is that there's no secret deal. I think that Tyrion's feelings are real and honest in the finale. I think he genuinely thinks that Cersei made the peace deal, which, you know, I think is sort of, like, motivated reasoning. Like, I think if he was really rational about it, he wouldn't trust Daenerys. But I think he's legit when, like, he thinks this deal has happened. But I don't know, like maybe Tyrion is plotting betrayal. We'll have to wait and see. It's interesting. Thank you, Crash and Power, for the super chat. Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Michael, Brian, Nedler. Ezequiel says, "Do you fear Alt Shift Xe for its superior content?" Yes, I live in fear every day. Go and watch Alt Shift Xe, guys. A truly inspired mind, I would say. Alice is the Fury asks, in the end, who will sit on the Iron Throne? I think no one. I think the Iron Throne will be destroyed. I think that would be the only satisfying ending to the story. Because Game of Thrones is about the failures of the system. Game of Thrones is about how having this like singular, centralized, undemocratic power just creates conflict and betrayal and murder, and we need a different system. That is, I think, a big part of what the show is about. So I think the throne will burn. Skywalker Sounds says White Ned Stark picks up his head, then attacks Arya. Does he attack Arya with his head? That I would like to see. Kyle B says, have you seen the tentative translation post on Reddit made on the choir lyrics from the title theme at the end of Season 4, Episode 10? No, I have not seen that. That sounds interesting. Because, yeah, there is a song that I think you're referring to when Arya sails off to the east on her boat to Bravos at the end of Season 4, Episode 10. And there is like, yeah, this choral theme that plays then. So yeah, it'd be cool if there's a translation. What language are they singing? Is it Valyrian or something? They had made up languages for this show. Anyway, Sogzalink the Great says the chances that Winds of Winter actually comes out is just as big as the chances of Roy Dotrice narrating the future audiobooks. The Game of Thrones audiobooks were narrated by this guy Roy Dotrice, who played the Pyromancer in Season 2. And he died recently, sadly. And Sogzalink is not optimistic about Winds of Winter coming out. Miguel Sedja says, Night's King just wants to rest in the crypts. That's an interesting idea. So there are lots of different theories about like what the Night King's real motivation is. Like the stated motivation is just to kill all life on Westeros, but you know, there's a lot of hints that there's something more than that going on. And there are some ideas about like maybe the Night King just wants to rescue his queen, who's like trapped in the crypts of Winterfell or something. Or maybe the Night King just wants to take back the babies that were promised that they need to turn into more White Walkers, like like Gilly's baby, little Sam. And yeah, so Miguel is suggesting that maybe the Night King just wants to be put to rest in the crypts. And, you know, that I think is a good idea, because, like, the Night King could be a Stark, for all we know. The Starks we do know were, like, closely involved in the original Long Night, if at least the show is any indication. Because in one of the little animated featurettes, they said that the last hero, who's, like, basically Azor Ahai, was a Stark. So we know that the Starks were involved. I think it's plausible that the Night King is a Stark, and that would explain like the connection between Bran and the Night King to some extent. And so maybe the Night King just wants what every other Stark king gets, which is to be put to rest in the crypts. Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea. Evan Kinsey says popsicles are good. Pat Riley says Pod is the prince that was promised, and you can't prove me wrong. Podrick is going to be interesting. I think Podrick might get knighted because Brienne in Season 5 started training Bronn, training Pod to fight, specifically because Podrick was interested in becoming a knight. Pod said he wants to be a knight. So maybe that'll finally happen. Or alternatively, maybe Brienne could finally become a knight. Because Brienne's whole thing is that she is like the best, most honorable, most legit knight in Westeros. Except ironically, she can't be a knight because she's a woman. Maybe they'll change the rules and make Brienne a knight because she is the most legit knight there is. Or alternatively, Pod could be a knight just for being such a baller. Thank you, Robert. Drop the bag. Bill Wang. Nadia, Brian Kachera, thank you for the super chat, says Bran changed time. The vision of the throne room shows the 7-pointed star over the Iron Throne, but Cersei changed that window when she took the throne, so the destruction already happened. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be the whole thing, mate, to be honest. So what Brian is referring to is this is what the Iron Throne has above it for most of the series, that 7-pointed star window. And that's what we see in this shot when the throne room is burned. We see the 7-pointed star there. But in season 7 or whatever it is, the window is removed by Cersei and replaced with a Lannister circle thing there, you see? So the set's changed. And I think Brian's arguing that, well, since that changed, then this vision has to be in the past, not in the future. But, like, come on, like, it's just a retcon. It's just something that's been tweaked. I don't think we've got to let, like, minor production changes like that influence, like, our perception of the whole story. Gwyn Bleed, thanks for the super chat. Thank you, Nick Homie. Nick Homie says, is Clegane Bowl happening or not? Clegane Bowl is 200% happening. I thought it was going to happen in season 6 because they sort of teased it in season 6, with like Cersei's trial and planning for the Mountain to fight in it. But like this shot alone tells me that Clegane Bowl has to happen. Clegane Bowl, for those who aren't aware, is a fight between the Mountain and the Hound. The Mountain and the Hound are brothers. The Mountain burned the Hound's face and, like, imparted him with this horrible, cynical worldview. The Hound sees the Mountain as kind of the reason why he is the bitter, angry person who he is. And the idea is that Sandor will put his demons to rest by killing the Mountain, probably with fire, because the Hound is afraid of fire because of his burn, but maybe he'll overcome that fear, kill the Mountain, save the day. That would be... You know, it's almost too storybook, but, like, the amount of hype that it's gotten in the fandom is such that, like, I think the showrunners just have to do it at this point. Like, it's fan service, but, like, it would be so much fun that, like, I think it's, like, yeah, it's a cert. And the fact that they, you know, have this as their cover on Entertainment Weekly, to me says that it's going to happen. Thank you, Zenon Faye, who says, I sometimes wonder if story predictions lead us to assuming some things should happen, and thus getting disappointed if they don't happen in the show. Yeah, that's absolutely a risk, especially when we go as deep as we go into, like, the Game of Thrones fandom, because, like, people come up with really cool ideas, and they can't all happen, and when they don't happen, it can be a little bit of a downer, but you've just got to have realistic expectations, I think. Like, we just got to accept that there's only, like, 6 hours left of Game of Thrones ever. They can't get too complicated, they can't get too crazy, so, you know, it is what it is, and just enjoy it. I think that's the right attitude. We got super chats from Smokescreen. So for y'all who don't know, Smokescreen is a Game of Thrones YouTube channel. They do a bunch of live streams. They do a bunch of predictions and stuff, and you should totally check them out. Yeah, who's this noob live streaming? Welcome to the chat, Smokescreen. Good channel. Check it out. Matthias B says, a zombie dragon blowing fire is weird. Well, he's blowing blue fire, so, you know, they changed the color. That's all right. Yeah, I'm not sure how zombie blue fire works. Like, does it feel cold or does it feel hot? How does it work? I don't know. It's probably not important. Kajoro says, will Euron sacrifice Yara to summon Cthulhu for Cersei? Probably. Well, in the books at least. In the books, like, Euron Greyjoy is a scary motherfucker. In the show, he's a pirate without an eye patch. Like this is Euron in the show. In the show, this is Euron in the books. Euron in the books is like sorcerous and scary. He's got like blue lips because he uses some really wacky drugs. He appears in dreams as like this god-slaying, demoniacal, terrifying, just nasty dude. He's like a sorcerous, eldritch dude. In the books, and he is planning a blood sacrifice. He is planning to kill thousands and thousands of people as a sacrament to some dark, salty god. So I think it's pretty likely that some kind of like monstrosity will rise from the deeps in the next Game of Thrones book. In the show, I think not. Dude, thank you for the chat. M+M, thank you for the chat. Kotjil, Garland, Sojkajik. Yeah, dude asks, will we see the 5 forts? Oh, that's one of the really cool, interesting parts of the book lore. So they haven't mentioned the 5 forts in the show, and I don't expect they will. But this piece, created by Martin Hernley, is the artist who made this piece, This is the Five Forts, and it is this giant, crazy set of fortresses at the opposite end of the world. So in the far, far east of the world, there are these huge fortresses which are guarding against demons in a freezing desert called the Grey Waste. And there's this whole mythos about like how the demons of the Lions of Night attacked one time, and then they were beaten back by Azor Ahai. And so basically, like, the story of the Five Forts seems to be a story that's very similar to, if not identical to, the story of the White Walkers attacking and then the wall being built to keep them back. So there's like the same story happening at the opposite end of the world. So it's like, well, is it a coincidence that the same thing happened? Or does the far east actually connect with Westeros, and the White Walkers live in a place in between the Five Forts and the wall? That would be really cool. And I think we'll probably not learn like anything more about it, to be honest, or at least anything more substantial. I think it'll just exist as like a cool Easter egg, probably. And yeah, certainly I don't expect it to come up in the show. But yeah, the Five Forts are dope. If you want to know more, go and watch our East video, the Essos video, which is about all this stuff, or it's about some of this stuff. Thank you, Arden. Thank you, Drita Moody. Drita Moody says that the Night King is actually from the Expanse universe, because he's made up of blue proto-molecule. Yeah, so The Expanse is a sci-fi series. The author of, the co-author of The Expanse was kind enough to speak to me about The Expanse in making our videos about The Expanse, which was really fucking cool. Go and check out The Expanse if you haven't already. Nick Homey says, how do you think Jorah Mormont's storyline will end? Well, it has to end with a noble sacrifice for Daenerys, doesn't it? I mean, what else can Jorah possibly do? Like, his whole defining thing in his life is his loyalty to Daenerys. And he also seems to have sort of accepted that Jon Snow is who Daenerys has chosen. Jorah has been super, like, weird and controlling about other men before. Jorah often tries to isolate Daenerys from other men. But at this point, he seems to have accepted that he's not getting out of the friend zone, and Jon is Daenerys's one true ship. So what's Jorah gonna do? Just like, I guess he could be Queensguard to Daenerys in the future, but that's even assuming that Daenerys will survive, which I think she probably won't. So yeah, my guess is that Jorah nobly sacrifices himself for Daenerys. It's amazing that he hasn't already done that. TBQF. Rock Opera says, is Westeros flat? No. We made a video called What's West of Westeros, where we talk about that, and the in-universe Maesters believe that the world of Westeros is round, and so does George Martin. George Martin said that it's round, which supports the idea that, you know, the Far East connects to the West and all of that. CJT says, in the Together clip, Dany seems to be back at the Dragonstone fireplace with Jon, who walks away 10 seconds in. Yeah, so that is interesting. I'll pull up the shot. So in one of the new trailers, we see Daenerys at Dragonstone. I'm just trying... Yeah, here we are. So this is one of the Season 8 trailers. Jon and Daenerys, and this background, people have done the math. This is definitely on Dragonstone, which is interesting because Jon and Daenerys have just gone to Winterfell to fight all the dead. So what are they doing back on Dragonstone? Did Daenerys and Jon retreat from defeat at Winterfell? Like, the whole Aftermath teaser certainly suggests that the Battle of Winterfell is lost. And so it looks like they run back to Dragonstone, which has some pretty big implications. Like, damn, like, Winterfell has fallen, apparently. Carolian says, well, maybe that's before they sailed away from Dragonstone. Except we've already seen them sail away from Dragonstone. They've done boat sex. So, yeah, I think this is significant. Like, Dragonstone, I guess, is where you would retreat to after Winterfell falls. Because, you know, you're not going to go to King's Landing. Dragonstone is Daenerys' stronghold. So, man, they're going to have some big conversations on Dragonstone about, like, well, what are we going to do now? Are we going to fight the zombie apocalypse? Are we going to take the throne? And also, you know, the fact that they're on Dragonstone, you can't bring many, like, refugees back to Dragonstone, I don't think. If you've abandoned Winterfell, you've abandoned, like, the 500,000 Northmen. who live in the north and who are pretty much defenseless from the White Walkers without the defense of Winterfell and the Starks. So this has some really grim implications if it is that they've fallen. Ryan Gordon says Alt Shift XXX should be a channel. William Johnson says, when will Winds of Winter be released? When it's done. Stephen says, do you think any more dragons will die? I think it's quite possible that all the dragons will die. Because similar to the Iron Throne, like, dragons are a symbol of destructive power and war. And I don't know if dragons have a place in peacetime Westeros. Like, they sort of worked for a while under the Targaryen rule of Westeros until they didn't, until the Dance of the Dragons happened and the dragons mostly died and this terrible war tore the realm apart. Maybe the only happy ending for Westeros means the dragons dying and that danger no longer existing. Because I think if you're expecting Daenerys the Dragon Queen to, benevolently rule Westeros through the power of her dragons, I don't think that would be the right ending, because we've sort of already seen that kind of government and the problems with that government in history. So yeah, maybe the dragons will die. Skywalker Sounds says, is Dany pregnant? I think Dany will have to get pregnant just because of how much they've talked about her fertility. Like in season 7, Jon was like, oh, is it really true that you can't have kids? And I don't think Miri Maz-Duur was right about that. And, Tyrion talked about it. And Daenerys keeps saying the dragons are the only kids I'll ever have. I think Daenerys has to get pregnant just because of how much they've talked about it. And they've talked about her succession. I think it's quite possible that Daenerys might die, but maybe her child will live on somehow. I mean, that's got the same problem as, like, Cersei's child, admittedly. Because, I don't think there'll be 9 months in season 8. Some people say that, oh, well, maybe there'll be, like, an epilogue and maybe, like, Daenerys will, like, die giving birth to her child or something. Because there is a real spate of women in Westeros dying in childbirth. Jon and Daenerys and Tyrion's mothers all died in childbirth. I think it would be a bit silly if that happened to Dany as well. But yeah, I think Daenerys' pregnancy is all but certain. Whether she'll ever give birth to that child, I don't know. Seth Meyer says, what if the Great War isn't the finale and the real showdown is Jon versus Daenerys in a dance of dragons, dragon versus dragon? That would be intense. There is a line of thinking that Daenerys will be like an evil mad queen, that Daenerys will become an antagonist. I don't think that'll happen in the show, at least. I don't think Daenerys and Jon will fight against each other like that. But I think one of the interesting ideas is that the White Walkers, like the war against the White Walkers, will end earlier in the season, and then dealing with Cersei on the Iron Throne will happen later in the season. Because it's weird, right? That we've been told that this big battle at Winterfell happens in season 8, episode 3. It just feels weird for such a climactic battle to happen early in the season. Maybe the Night King will actually be defeated in this battle, despite what the trailer suggests. Because, why are they telling us the outcome of this battle, right? Like, why is there a trailer telling us that in Season 8, Episode 3, the good guys get defeated by White Walkers? Like, that's kind of weird to just tell us, right? Maybe it's a red herring or something. But in any case, maybe Cersei on the throne will be the real final boss of Game of Thrones. Kyle B, thanks for the super chat. Apparently, the song When Arya Sails Off, that we mentioned before, is in Valyrian and Spanish, and it refers to her taking the throne. So I guess people are saying that Arya will take the Iron Throne because of the Spanish Valyrian translation of a song from season 4. Forgive me, I doubt that's gonna give away the ending of the series. But yeah, maybe the composer knows something we don't, and maybe Arya will become Queen of Westeros. Arya has no political skills, as we saw in season 7 when she almost killed her sister. So I don't think Arya will be queen. Maybe there'll be some moment where everybody else dies, and then Arya, as some kind of embodiment of death, sits on the throne and says, it's like symbolically death winning in a way. That could be an interesting dark ending, I guess. But I'm just talking out my ass. I don't think Arya will be queen. There is an interesting thing in one of the official Game of Thrones games. There's like this casual game where you like flip Game of Thrones Reigns, it's called. And Game of Thrones Reigns presents like 9 different options for who the ruler of Westeros will be at the end of Game of Thrones, and one of them is Arya wearing the face of Cersei. Like, the idea is that Cersei gets killed by Arya. Arya takes Cersei's face and then rules Westeros as her, which kind of does have a precedent in that in season 6/7, Arya kills Walder Frey, and then Arya wears Walder's face and apparently rules the twins for a while because Arya, like, you know, impersonated Walder Frey, gathered all those Freys together for that feast. So that kind of could work. Maybe Arya will rule as Cersei for a while. That would be cool and weird. And, you know, Arya's got to use her faces somehow, right? So that could be interesting. Thank you, Talani. Thank you, George. George says, do you think Jon possesses the fire resistance power? I would say no, because in season 1, Jon gets burned. When Jon fights the zombie Othor, he throws a lantern at Othor, and Jon burns. I'll pull up the picture of his bandages. Can you see it there? Yeah. Jon's got a boo-boo, and he got it from being burned. So Jon's not fireproof. Daenerys is also not fireproof in the books. Daenerys does get burned in the books, but that's different in the show. Thank you, Tom, who says, do you think the Hound pissing into the river in season 6 is a subtle nod to how they are passing on the Lady Stoneheart storyline? Yeah, I think it's finally time to let go of Lady Stoneheart, at least for the show. Actually, I guess that's kind of a spoiler if you haven't read the book, so I won't explain Stoneheart, but Stoneheart is a interesting character in the Game of Thrones books. Magnus says, somehow I believe Littlefinger being alive. Greetings from Germany. I don't think Littlefinger's still alive. I think his death in season 7 was definitive. I think Littlefinger was just as impotent as he seemed in that season. I don't think he made a deal with the Faceless Men, but hey, maybe D&D will surprise us all. Maura Lee says, in the books, do you think that fake Aegon is a Blackfire, or do you think he is who he says he is? Yeah, so in the books, there's a character called Young Griff, who Varys claims is the son of Rhaegar. And I think he's fake. I think he's a Blackfire. We made a video about this called Spider, What's Varys Up To? And we talk about this whole Blackfire theory. It's kind of complicated and it's only in the book, so we won't get into it. But it's cool. It's one of the coolest book theories, I think. And yeah, I think he's a fake for sure. And I think that'll be the Dance of Dragons in the books when Daenerys fights Aegon. Jeff Burst says, what do you think the huge spoiler Sophie said was written on a prop scroll she took off the set is? I don't know. That could be... I don't know. I'm always skeptical of like stuff that the cast says. Like, remember when before season 5, Sophie Turner said that season 5 is when Sansa really comes into her own and becomes powerful and capable and independent. And then it turned out that was the season where Sansa got sold off to the Boltons and just had a terrible time and didn't really accomplish anything. Like, I think that the actors just sort of say things that don't always turn out to be legit. Thank you, Mundungus Fletcher. Thank you, Benji Taylor. What will happen with the symbol the White Walkers and Children of Forest have used in the show? The White Walkers used it in the first season. So yeah, like, there have been these interesting symbols turning up. Stuff like this, and we found out in season 7 that these are like symbols that are sacred to the Children of the Forest that the White Walkers are now imitating and replicating, because that's what humans do, that's what people do, that's what White Walkers do. We copy symbols, we interpret things as sacred, we spread memes. This is basically just memes. It's all memes. So I wouldn't worry too much about exactly what the meaning of this stuff is. I mean, specifically, like, we do know that the White Walkers were created at this tree with the spiral around it. This is where the Night King was created. So, you know, by recreating the spiral, the White Walkers are recreating their birthplace. You know, they're recreating their god, their creation, in a pretty literal sense. That's a good enough reason to make a spiral, I think. So I don't think we necessarily need any more explanation than that for the symbols. John Bateman says, will Howland Reed show up this season? Probably not, just because most show watchers don't know who the fuck Howland Reed is. Howland Reed is this guy. He fought at the Tower of Joy alongside Ned Stark. He killed Arthur Dayne, and he apparently got wounded, and then he went back home to Greywater Watch, where he's apparently just been sitting with his thumb in his ass ever since. In the books, Howland Reed will probably play a role. Actually, I think George Martin said that Howland Reed will return, which is important because Howland Reed was at the Tower of Joy, so he knows that Jon Snow is the son of Rhaegar. So Howland Reed is gonna be up to some shit. But we don't need Howland Reed to reveal R plus L equals J in the show because we've got Psychic Bran and we've got Sam, who already know Jon's true parentage. So I don't think we'll see Howland. Kyle Chin asks, do you think Mira will show up again? Maybe? I mean, I don't really know where her arc is gonna go. Like, she's really like a secondary or like tertiary character. Like, she left at the end of season 7 just sort of saying, oh wow, like, it's really fucked up, Bran, that like you're not appreciating me for like dragging you cross country across like 1,000 miles of wilderness on your ass. Not to mention wiping his ass because he's, you know, paralyzed. So Mira's a fucking trooper. Like, she has sacrificed more for the cause than just about anyone in Game of Thrones. So it'd be nice for her to like have some kind of triumphant return. But like, again, like, there's only 6 hours or thereabouts of Game of Thrones left. I don't think they have time to bring back every tertiary character and, you know, let them take a bow. I think we probably won't see her again. But I hope we do. She's good. She's a great actress. Poos on Poos says, what will happen to Tormund fucking Giantsbane? So you could argue that Tormund is probably going to die just because he's a fairly expendable character. Like, you know, people like him and he's fun and he's charismatic, but he doesn't have some like deep arc or character conflict that really like needs some kind of profound resolution. Some people thought he was going to die last season when the wall fell down. I think that one of the reasons why Tormund might survive is that Tormund is a representative of the wildlings. Like, the wildlings are like an entire culture and people and political faction that like the wildlings need an outcome. The wildlings need an end to their story. We need to know what happened to them. And I don't think like we need a wildling character to represent them. And so unless you're a really big fan of Dim Dalba, who is this guy, unless you feel really attached to this character, who's like the one other named wildling who's still alive, I think we got to have Tormund alive, just to serve as representative of the wildlings, and just at the end of the show to say, hey, we're the free folk, we're pretty happy farming the gift, it's all good. Like, you know, I think we need Tormund for that. Thank you, Pietro, who says, do you think Cersei is really pregnant? Yeah, I think she is really pregnant. I think that will be like a major source of like drama for Cersei. Because Cersei genuinely, like, Cersei doesn't want to be on her own. Like, now that Jaime has left Cersei, Cersei lives for her family and for her children, like she said as much before. And I don't know if Cersei will have that much to live for if she has no one, if she has only her own, like, power lust and revenge to live for. If that's all she has, if all Cersei has is that anger and hatred, I think she'll self-destruct pretty much instantly. So I think Cersei's pregnancy is part of what she's fighting for in a very real way. And if she loses that child one way or another, I think that'll be the turning point where Cersei really turns it up to 11 and starts burning shit down. Yeah. MC, thanks for the super chat. Yeah, I do. Well, Yeah, we talked about that before, but I think something along the lines of democracy will probably happen, or some kind of different form of government will probably happen in Game of Thrones because Tyrion's talked about it and so on. Kyle B says, what exactly do you think Pod did to those whores? So in season 4, I think 4, Tyrion takes Podrick to the brothel. No, season 3. And Podrick returns with the bag of cash that Tyrion gave him because the prostitutes were so happy with Podrick's performance that they refused payment. Rapid Reader 4's theory is big PP. Maybe. My theory is that Podrick told them the punchline to the joke about the honeycomb and the jackass that Tyrion keeps trying to tell. One of the actually low-key sort of heart punch things about this whole Podrick episode is that Tyrion is making a big point of rewarding Podrick for serving him well and saving him at the Blackwater. This is Tyrion's way of showing his appreciation to Podrick. And that's happening in the context of Tyrion's whole sort of arc in Season 3 is about his desperate attempts to win the approval of his father. Like, in Season 3, Episode 1, Tyrion comes to Tywin and he's like, hey, I battled on the Blackwater for this family. Like, please give me appreciation. I want costly rock, but the subtext is what he really wants is the love of his father. That's what Tyrion's pursuing, and Tywin responds with just hatred and vitriol at his son. He rejects his son. And then, again, Tyrion works as Master of Coin, and he comes to Tywin and he's like, hey, look at all these things that I did for our family as Master of Coin. And then Tywin just says, fuck off. And so I think the meaning in Tyrion rewarding Podrick is that Tyrion is showing Podrick the love and the approval that Tyrion wishes he got from Tywin. He's treating Podrick the way he wishes he was treated by his father, which I think is a really heartbreaking side to this otherwise just sort of funny scene. So yeah, just in case you're having too much fun, there's dramatic subtext. All right, Austin, thanks for the super chat, says, you do a lot of analysis on Game of Thrones. Do you have any plans to do quality critique type stuff, like ranking, reviewing the season 8 seasons after the show ends? Alt-Shift-X isn't really about, reviews. Kind of the point of Alt-Shift-X is that we at least try to be, objective. And you can never really be objective, but we try to base everything in the text, and it's about explaining what are the ideas in the text, what's the author trying to communicate, what are the complexities, what's the plot, what's happening, and what meaning arises from the text. That's what Alt-Shift-X is about. Alt-Shift-X isn't so much about is this thing good or is this thing bad. There's plenty of YouTube channels full of people giving their opinions about shit, and Alt-Shift-X tries to be not that. And, we don't always succeed. But for that reason, we're not going to do a top 10 Game of Thrones episodes or something. We're not going to say this was a 10 out of 10 episode, this was a 5 out of 10. It's not really the purpose of Alt-Shift-X. Scott D says, do you think George R. R. Martin has the books done and HBO made a deal to make him hold them until the show is over? No. I think if George had the books done, he would not be able to contain himself. I don't think George Martin is evil enough to try and withhold the books, nor do I think it would benefit anyone to withhold the books. I think that the show is obviously facing challenges as a result of the books not being done. I think it is in everybody's interests for the books to be done. So yeah, no, I don't think there's that kind of skullduggery going on. Thank you, the Gatanor, who says, will the Night's King give Bronn a castle? Will the Red Woman bring a holy army? Yeah, well, Bronn's entire thing lately has been that he really wants a castle. And I think he has to get something in the end, or at least he has to get some kind of conclusion to that arc. I don't know if the Night King will give it. But Melisandre, that's interesting. Because Melisandre at the end of season 7 went across the Narrow Sea to Volantis. And we don't know why. She said that she would come back. So what mission is Melisandre up to in Essos? In the books, and in the show, a whole bunch of the Red Priests of R'hllor are preaching that Daenerys is the savior of the world. And so some people expect that some of the R'hlloric cities of Essos might send military support for Daenerys. In the books, this guy Benero, the High Priest, has the Fiery Hand, which is like this army of slave soldiers. And maybe he'll send them in support of Daenerys. So maybe Melisandre will like come back in the 11th hour with an army of red priest slave soldier people to help fight the White Walkers in season 8. I think that would be cool. Bit like Helm's Deep with the elves again. Mega Lats says, what do you think about Arya wearing Jaime's face to kill Cersei? Jaime dies in Winterfell, but Arya uses his face to fulfill the Valancourt prophecy. Yeah, I mean, I still think that Arya killing Cersei is just not as meaningful as Jaime killing Cersei, because Jaime and Cersei have a lifetime of drama and love and hate that gives that killing meaning. Whereas Arya has met Cersei like once, and, you know, she doesn't like her very much, but she doesn't have that depth of a relationship that Jaime and Cersei do. So for that reason, I think it would be a bit underwhelming if Arya was the one who killed Jaime. I mean, you could argue that if Arya wears Jaime's face, then at least Cersei will react as though it was Jaime, so at least from her perspective it would be as meaningful, and then maybe that frees up Jaime to die with Brienne in Winterfell, dying in his true love's arms, you know? So that could be interesting, but I still think that it feels best for Jaime to kill Cersei. And the Valancourt prophecy, for those who aren't aware, in the books, Maggie the Frog prophesies that Cersei will be killed by her Valancourt. And Valancourt means little brother. This is Maggie the Frog. And so Cersei believes that means that Tyrion will kill her. But many readers believe that actually means that Jaime will kill Cersei, because Jaime is also Cersei's little brother. He's her twin, and he came out just after she did. So I think it's most likely that Jaime will kill Cersei. All right, I think we're going to wrap this up very shortly. If you've got any desperate, burning questions remaining, chuck them in the chat. Let me just make sure I didn't miss too many people. And yeah, sorry if I missed your super chat. We're not going to get to every single one of them. Pinky Polak says, the actor who plays Euron says he's the only character who gets a happy ending. Oh dear, that can only mean something bad, I think. Maybe Euron literally just sails off. Like, maybe Euron just nopes out of Westeros like he said he would in season 7. That would be funny. Like, if he just gets one look at the bloody ice spiders and then he's just like, nah, not for me, and then he just leaves. I think that would be cool, and funny, and like fitting with what Euron's character is in the show. But I think in all likelihood Euron will get his just desserts, and I think Euron will die, be killed by dragons or by Theon or someone. Do you think George Martin will use the show continuity, the book's ending? I think that, well, we have been told by George and the showrunners that the ending of the books and the show is meant to be broadly the same. There are going to be some differences, because there are lots of differences between the show and the books, but they're meant to be fundamentally the same. So, you know, who lives, who dies, who sacrifices who, I expect that stuff to be roughly the same. Kyle B says, do you think Hodor will come back? I think it's pretty likely that Hodor will come back as a zombie, because, you know, he died up in the north to White Walkers, and it would be a really emotional, horrifying moment for him to come back and face the Starks. Maybe Arya was running away from zombie Hodor. That would be fucked up. And the map of your head says, do you think there's a chance that Littlefinger is alive? Yeah, people keep asking this. I think Littlefinger's dead. I don't, because like Littlefinger didn't really know what he was doing in season 7. And I think he got a pretty conclusive and pretty convincing send-off. And yeah, you know, maybe he secretly made a deal with the Faceless Man and someone died in his place. But, you know, that's what we thought about Arya when she got stabbed in season 6, and that didn't work out, did it? I don't think Littlefinger is an endgame character, in the show at least. Zaxarian says, do you think we'll see any ice spiders or perhaps a version of the Night's Queen? I think ice spiders are likely because ice spiders have been mentioned twice in the show. As recently as Hard Home, they were talking about ice spiders big as hounds. So I think that'll be paid off. I don't think we'll see the Knights. Well, we might see like a new Knights Queen if, like, John does something freaky. If John becomes a new Knights King and like marries a White Walker or something to create peace with the White Walkers, which is sort of foreshadowed in the books, that could be legit. But I don't think we'll see like the original Night's Queen. I don't think she'll be, locked up in Winterfell. Like, I think that's a cool theory. But I think it would feel like it's come out of the blue in the show because they've never talked about the Night's Queen in the show. And in fact, the books have never even used the term Night's Queen. So yeah, I think that would be cool, but I don't think it's going to happen. Trey Contreras says Cersei will die giving birth to a dwarf. Yeah, that's a cool idea that's been going around. It would be sort of a poetic death for Cersei, given that she's irrationally hated Tyrion so much, partly just because he's a gross dwarf, and yet Cersei loves her children. It would be this great sort of ironic, just death if she gives birth to a dwarf. Some people have also linked that to her drinking, suggesting that maybe like Cersei drinking while she's pregnant could cause her to give birth to a dwarf. I'm not a doctor, but there's some interesting ideas floating around. Brian says, will Melisandre burn anybody else? I think Melisandre might herself be burned. Like she's, she might be fireproof or some shit, but I think some kind of fiery sacrifice for Melisandre would make a lot of sense. I was pretty convinced for a long time that Jon would execute Melisandre for killing Shireen by stabbing her with Longclaw, and then Longclaw would take flame, and like Melisandre's flame would go into the sword, like the Nissa story, and so Melisandre would like die to make Jon Azor Ahai or something like that. I think something along those lines still could happen with Melisandre making some kind of like mystical fiery sacrifice. Self-sacrifice. Whether she'll burn anyone else, I don't know. I think Melisandre sort of lost the taste for burning people alive ever since Shireen. Like, Melisandre has admitted that she made terrible mistakes. So yeah, I don't expect her to. I mean, even if she did start saying, "Hey, it's really important that we burn Lyanna Mormont," no one's gonna listen to her. Like, Melisandre is in everyone's bad books now. I don't think she's gonna convince a lot of people for that. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Dovid. Dovid says, "Can you predict the ending?" I think we've kind of been doing that this entire time, haven't we? We've got some ideas. I think the Iron Throne will probably be destroyed. I think that Jon will probably become some sort of White Walker-y sacrifice person, and or Daenerys will be sacrificed in order to save the world. I think that Cersei will die. I think King's Landing will burn. I think that the White Walkers will be beaten, but in like a bittersweet way where like we sort of understand the White Walkers a little bit better at the end. Like, they're not going to turn out to be misunderstood good guys, but they're going to turn out to sort of have some kind of sympathetic reasons for doing what they're doing. Like, I think we'll understand the Night King better. I think Bran will become a tree. I think Sansa will become Queen in the North. Is that enough predictions? JVXX95 says, do you think Jon, etc., will have a last stand at the Trident against the dead, like Rhaegar? Yeah, so Daenerys has a dream in the books where she burns a bunch of people wearing ice as armor. She burns them with her dragons, which a lot of people see as foreshadowing that Daenerys will burn the army of the dead at the Trident. And yeah, like you say, that has a lot of cool parallels with Jon's father Rhaegar, who died at the Battle of the Trident against Robert Baratheon. So yeah, I think that would be cool if they fought the dead at the Trident. And that also would fit the Season 8 trailer, if I can pull that up real quick. Remember this like CGI trailer we got? Where the ice and the fire met in the middle of this map of Westeros? Well, the middle of Westeros where the ice and fire meets is roughly the Trident, that river in Westeros. So yeah, I think this is a strong indication that might happen. William says, how do you think Bran and Jaime's reunion will be? That could be interesting, because in the show and the books, Bran does not remember that Jaime pushed him from the tower. In fact, in the books, it's specifically the Three-Eyed Raven, or Blood Raven as he's called in the books. He actually specifically removes Bran's memory of Jaime pushing Bran. He says, you don't need that now. So, like, he's trying to, like, not let him get too distracted by the whole defenestration situation. And there's sort of a line of thought that maybe Bran, like, now that he's all dehumanized in the show, like, Bran sort of isn't Bran anymore because he's just turned into a psychic computer. Maybe Bran seeing Jaime again will make him remember that Jaime pushed Bran from the tower, and maybe along with that, Bran will start remembering how to be Bran again, and maybe Bran will suddenly return to his identity as a result of seeing the person who tried to kill him, you know? I think that could be sort of an interesting, dramatic thing to happen. Alternatively, Bran just sees Jaime and doesn't give a shit because he's Robo Bran now, and, you know, Bran's in the past, and, you know, he just doesn't feel anything. That's another possibility. Someone says that Miguel says Cersei is drinking wine because Jaime died. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk of this particular shot of Cersei in the trailer. She's drinking wine. She's got tears in her eyes. She's also kind of smiling. It's sort of a emotionally ambiguous sort of a shot. A lot of people say that maybe she just lost her unborn child. Maybe that's why she's upset. And yeah, maybe it could also be Jaime. And maybe, like, as another commenter suggested, maybe Jaime's just died, and then Arya is going to come south wearing Jaime's face, and then Cersei's going to be like, OMG, BBQ, you're alive. And then, oh wait, there's a needle in my chest. William Kalov says, do you think the House of the Undying vision means that Dany won't ever sit on the Iron Throne? Yeah, so that's this shot again of Daenerys with the Iron Throne in Season 2. Daenerys approaches the Iron Throne and she reaches out for it, but then she turns away and she doesn't touch it. And yeah, I've long thought that that is a hint that Daenerys won't get the throne. And I think it'll be really interesting if Daenerys chose not to take the throne. Because, like, you know, she's already kind of choosing to do that. Like, in Season 7, everyone's saying, like, hey, Daenerys, like, you could fly up to King's Landing with your dragons and take the throne today. The reason why she doesn't do that is that attacking King's Landing with dragons would cause the deaths of thousands of people, which, low-key, I don't think it necessarily would. But the point is that Daenerys is choosing not to take the throne for the betterment of the realm. She's sacrificing her own personal power and ambition for the good of everyone else. And I think that could be how Daenerys' arc ultimately ends. She could choose that, hey, the most important thing isn't me having the throne, the most important thing is me saving the world from White Walkers. And whether that will result in, like, self-sacrifice or just choosing to go and do something else, open a fish and chip shop, you know, I think Daenerys will do something other than rule. I think that's pretty likely. You know, then again, you can make the argument that, like, Daenerys' like entire arc has been about her learning how to rule, and that seems kind of wasted if Daenerys doesn't end up ruling, right? So maybe you've got to argue that Daenerys has got to be on the throne. Mike Camiso says, will Jon push Bran out of a window when Bran tells him he's been porking his auntie? Yeah, it would be hilarious if every time Bran tries to tell somebody that hey, someone's fucking someone they shouldn't, and he just gets defenestrated. That would be funny. Arcadia says, I can't be the only one who wants a hot pie of Westeros spin-off sitcom. I reckon, yeah, a cooking show maybe would be really fun with hot pie. Thank you, William Johnson. Thank you, Jade Rabbit. Do you think we'll see a bunch of famous knights who gave Valyrian swords fight the others? Famous house people and random mercenaries. Yeah, well, there's certainly a shitload of minor characters in the books who are really cool in all sorts of ways who just don't appear in the show because they can't all appear in the show. It would be pretty funny if they just got a bunch of random extras just to sort of represent some of those book characters, and it could just be an Easter egg just for the book readers. But, you know, if we saw, like, Flemont Brax standing in the background with his unicorn helmet, I would be excited. I think a bunch of giant nerds would be very excited if we got some of those minor characters. But I don't think it'll happen. Joshua Comigus says, could Westeros become a democracy? Yeah, we've talked about that. I think some kind of alternative system of government is likely because Tyrion talked about it. And Bruce Clowney says, worst possible ending, question mark. I think the worst possible ending would be the White Walkers kill everyone and the Night King sits on the throne and then he takes off his face and it was Ed Sheeran all along. Thank you so much for joining in this live stream. It's been fun. It's been real. We're going to be doing one of these streams after every episode of Game of Thrones Season 8. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you press that like button. We're getting pretty close to 1 million subscribers, so get it up there, guys. And also, we got that merch. Hashtag buy that merch. We got a shirt and we got a pin. Check it out. Check it out. You would look so good in that shirt. Wouldn't, like, check it, like, come on. That shirt was made for you. It is my shirt. Hashtag the mystery of Amigara Fault. I think you'd look good in that shirt. I think you should buy one. That pin would look great. You know, the only thing that would look better than that pin on you? 2 pins. It will be XX. You could buy 3 pins and say XXX. Wouldn't that be cheeky? I reckon you should get one. But no, thank you for participating, everybody. And we're gonna make more videos. We've got a video about Tyrion coming out soon. In a couple of days, that video will be out. It'll be out earlier for patrons. Patrons get videos earlier. Well, usually not much earlier during Game of Thrones Season 8. But also in these live streams are available to watch later for patrons. So like the way it works is that these streams are public for everyone, but if you want to like rewatch them later, the links are available on the Patreon. The reason for that is that I don't want to clutter up the Alt-Shift-X channel with all these like 2-hour-long rambling live streams. So yeah, these live streams won't be like watchable for the public afterwards, but they will be watchable for patrons afterwards because we want to give the patrons something special. And yeah, thanks for the last couple super chats, Gina and Jenny Pop. Yeah, thanks. Cheers, everyone. It was fun. We'll do more of these soon. Have a good one. In the words of Hairless Oyster, be well, stay hydrated, and keep it real. Cheers. Thanks.